How are you? How are you doing?
Doing really well. We're uh, getting into the groove of things up here, and really enjoying what God's called us to do.
Now, some people know what you meant by what you just said, but when you say get in the groove of things, you need to explain
Yeah.
to everybody that you evacuated the South and you went about as far north as you could go uh, to
Yes.
to Clarence, New York, and you've been praying about this for a while. What I'm talking about is you're now pastoring a church up in New York, and there'll still be a number of people that have not gotten that word. I've had some folks that have asked, "Where's life over coffee?" Because we had a good groove there going for a while, and we were actually batching out, these videos. I'd go over to your house, and we'll do 4 or 5, maybe 6 videos, and that'll get us going for a month or a month and a half. But I'm not going to commute to where you
especially
live.
especially in the winter, right?
So
Yeah.
explain. So you're pastoring a church in Clarence. So how did that come about? I know pastoring's been on your heart for a while. We've talked about it, but now you're actually doing it. So if you could just bring everybody up to speed on what God is doing in your life and Oriana's life
Yeah.
and your kids.
No, we when we started this year, we knew God was you know kind of that uncomfortable twitch that something was coming, kind of thing that we both sensed, but had no idea, really what God was doing, and definitely not where God was calling us to. So, as you and I have talked about, I've been asked by numerous physicians, and even right before we left Greer, South Carolina, there had a physician ask if I would help him start a Christian clinic and help people going through what the world calls psychiatric distress, and what we call a crisis or suffering, trials, etc. In Scripture. And so, as we thought through and prayed literally for several years and talked with numerous different people and tried to think through what this would look like, we just kept coming back to the reality that what we're really talking about is church, and that this is the sick house. This is where the soul gets healed. And so we really started seeing God shape our hearts and our minds toward returning to pastoral work. Um, and interestingly enough, God even used a secularist several years ago. I was interviewing with Peter Berger, who's about 5 hours from us now. And he actually said on our radio program, he said, you with your theology degree are best equipped to do psychiatric work. Soul care is the way that we call it. And he said, we all know within all the studies that the Christian faith is itself healing. And it's interesting because that God used that, just to really solidify that hey, we are to be um, we're to care for the souls. So in May, we came up to Buffalo, New York, just outside of Buffalo, in a little town called Clarence. It's a conservative area. Buffalo's not, but Clarence is. A lot of farmland and a lot of snow in the winter. But in fact, we had,
What's the temperature there now?
well, today it's 82, which is a record setting day.
Okay,
So,
well actually it's 81. I just looked. It's 81 here. So
yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's, that's kind of odd.
yeah.
I was expecting it to be much cooler there.
Well, we were too. 12, 13 years ago, they had almost 2 feet of snow in October. So it can happen.
Right.
But we'll take the warm weather for sure. So we
So
had
just for a point of clarification, where's your wife from?
my wife is from the Dominican Republic, so they don't get snow down there.
Yeah, I'm sure she's seen snow before.
Oh
But
yeah, yeah.
has she lived in a wintry climate for 3, 4, 5 months?
No, she has not. Greenville doesn't really count
No, no,
as
no, no.
Greer doesn't count as,
Yeah, all
but
right. So we'll
she
check.
loves. She prefers the cold. I
Yeah.
prefer the beach.
Okay. Well, we'll
So
check in with you in the
yeah,
spring, and we'll
yeah.
see We'll see if that's still your story.
Yeah, and we had to check to see if U-Haul trucks even came this way. And it's funny. Everyone I tell that we've moved, or when we were moving, they were like, "Well, why? Do you not know it snows there?"
Yeah.
Everybody's trying to get out, but we really see God's hand in this, and this is a New Testament calling where God orchestrated everything as we've traveled around and preached, really burdened for this particular group. And
What does that mean for conferencing and book writing?
well, believe it or not, it actually creates an even stronger ministry opportunity. Of course, we've had to take a hiatus because of from Life Over Coffee just for a short time because of moving and just getting established. And then I had a series the last 2 weeks I've been traveling, but those were already organized. But my family is still my priority. That's always been my priority. That is the ministry, and then the local church. So Aletheia is still third. It's not going to go away, but it's actually being strengthened.
Aletheia is your ministry,
Yeah,
or
Aletheia International
the name
Ministries,
of
or
our
AIM.
ministry, right?
Yep,
It's not some girl on the side.
that's
Aletheia,
right. That's
uh,
right.
actually, it means truth, right?
Yep, yep,
Yeah,
that's right. So um, it's being strengthened because now there's the local church that's fully behind it. So we're having a soul care, discipleship, counseling, training mini conference, if you would, this weekend. We'll have another one in November, and then our big annual conference in May. So there's great opportunities that we have. Getting a buzz here. Sorry about that.
that's the life of a pastor right there.
Yeah, well, I've got phones all around me here, so I didn't know which one it was, but um, yeah, we're still going to be able to travel. When we talked about the church doesn't want us to stop ministering in this way, but now it's going to be more people coming to us, to get the training, and a lot more resources at our disposal. My desire is to train the people here to do the work, that
Right.
they're the ministers of the gospel versus me trying to do what I was doing. It just was getting overwhelming. So um, I really think this just even going to be stronger. And ironically, now that I'm pastoring, I'm getting more and more invites to speak, and books were thankfully already selling quite a bit, but now they're even more. So, I think people see the value in whether they realize it or not, that the local church is where this needs to happen.
Yeah, I agree. I had that conversation with somebody yesterday and also this morning that, we as a parachurch organization, that we are not the local church. We have no desire to replace the local church, and that every road that flows out of this ministry leads back to the local church, that we have a high view of the local church, and what we want to do, excuse me, what we want to do is to complement the local
That's right.
church. And that's our job. I was talking to a pastor in Georgia also this morning. I was speaking with another one in Michigan, but the one in Georgia, he one of our graduates from our mastermind program is there, a female, and he said there is a revival happening
Hmm.
with the women in the church, that this our graduate, God is just using her
Awesome.
in an impactful way, and it's just having this transformative effect on the ladies of the church. And it's like through identifying a guy at the church that could go through our leadership, go through our mastermind program and get that kind of equipping, because as you said, you want to equip the church. And what I told him, I said, when you do counseling on a formalized level, not informal discipleship, which is
That's right.
absolutely critical in the church, but when it comes to formalized complex cases that you're interacting with, that a pastor really can't do that,
Hmm.
because if you do one, you're going to get two, and then you're going to have three, four, five, and six.
Right.
Now all of a sudden you're going to be buried in, let's say, six individuals or six couples, which would take you away from shepherding the flock. And so as I explained to him, it's like as being a plumber and electrician, you can't be both. Those are two complex, different, in a sense, antithetical jobs, and you have to
Yeah.
choose one or the other. You're going to be a plumber or electrician. And so, what he wants to do is what you just said. He wants to
Yeah.
equip a group of plumbers that will really come up under the elder board and have that kind of
Yep.
liaison relationship with the elder board, a male and a female, and they're really handling a significant load. And of course, that doesn't mean that the pastor's not doing counseling. We're all
Right.
doing it, but
Yeah.
when you get into formalized counseling, and that was the warning, the optimistic warning that I gave him, that when you raise the counseling flag at a local church and say we actually care and we want to help,
Yeah.
then you're going to have more people that are going to come.
Yeah. It's discipleship. And I think the illustration you gave, I would say the general contractor is maybe a better illustration of what a pastor's
Of a
doing.
pastor, yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
It's not one hat; it's many
right.
hats.
He's equipping the saints to minister the gospel.
Right.
And
I'll use GC from now on, because
there you go.
that's actually a good illustration,
Yeah.
a more refined illustration.
Yeah. It's been really exciting. We have I've been speaking in this church that God called me to for the last 6 years, which is really neat. And one of the young men that I've been able to help and is actually just got married about a month ago. He was diagnosed as bipolar years ago, was on lithium and all kind of heavy drugs, diagnosed as bipolar 1. And God has saved him, and just he's walking with the Lord, matured in the faith. And just 2 weeks ago, he came to me and said, I'm really burdened that I help people that have been diagnosed, that they understand that that's not who they are, that that's not an accurate description. It's just the world trying to explain these types of behaviors. So this is a case in point of, we've gotten to minister, even though we weren't here, being the one of the elders, but now we're seeing the fruit of that, and he desires to do the work. So, that's how it needs to happen.
Yeah, and when, excuse me, when you talk about diagnosis, and so putting that you're using bipolar. Let's take a borderline personality disorder as just as an illustration. And so if a person comes in and begins to describe what is going on with them, talking to a secular counselor, is that secular counselor diagnosing this person? Is he discovering anything and really bringing a solution to this person? Is that what's happening, or what is going on in that dynamic when a person comes in and says, hey, this is what's happening to me, and then they give them, let's say, the label of borderline personality?
Is this another video, or are we just
we're
going through with it?
Yeah.
I said, how long do you want this to be?
Well, we'll go till we go, and we'll see what happens.
So, I think the first thing we have to do is define diagnosis, right, or diagnoses. The word comes from to discern between, or to decide between. And the problem with the word diagnosis is I think people assume it's a medical condition when it's used in that way, but it actually is used like a mechanic diagnoses the problem of your car. All it is evaluating whether it's ways of thinking, or like we talked about, an actual physical, you have a tumor. So I've got to now diagnose, is this cancerous or non-cancerous? I've got to determine. And then
is that what's happening when the guy comes in and says, this is what I'm going through, then diagnosis is actually adding to that. I'm giving you.
Yeah. So a psychiatric diagnosis is a couple things. One is it's actually determining between alleged normal and abnormal. And you take something like depression, and the leading experts admit there is no objective difference between normal and abnormal. We don't know what it's a neat idea. It's a construct. It's a way of it's a theory, but they're telling people they're disordered and there's no objective way. So the diagnosis here is someone's subjective opinion of well, I see this as abnormal because I can't explain it, versus, well, I can explain this deep sorrow, so therefore it's not. So there's the difference, if you would, why it's called diagnosis. But then you also have to consider diagnosis in between different constructs, psychiatric constructs. So is it bipolar depression or unipolar depression? Is it just major depression, or is it bipolar depression? So they would use that term in between. However, we've talked about this on previous videos. Psychiatric diagnoses are actually phenomenological. They're not physiological. They're not going to the body and saying, let's determine if this is an illness, like a physical disease or not. They say it is. They say that they're diagnosing physical disease, but they're actually just determining between their phenomenological labels, if you would, what you allegedly have. But they're not really telling you have something, if that makes sense.
So they're just saying in their own words what the person just said to them and putting a
That's right.
label to it. So I come in and here's 6 things that I sense that are happening to me. They listen to those 6 things. The diagnosis in this context is they repeat back to me in their own words, but they haven't added value. They basically
Right.
just parroted in their own language, a clinical language of what the counselee said. And then we come to agreement on that. So we're both saying the same thing. And then a label is placed on that.
Yes.
Okay.
It's
And then typically there's a medication that follows after. So, but
yeah,
you say diagnosis is discerning, but there's no discernment there.
correct. Well, and really discernment's a better word, but it's not
But
discernment
that,
as we would.
but that's not discernment. That's just
Well, it's not biblical discernment, right? It
right.
is
They're just
within their morals.
mirroring what the person said to them.
Right. And I guess the discernment would be between normal and abnormal, which is their moral system. They're trying to explain behavior, and what God says is moral behavior. And of course, not all psychiatric labels represent moral behavior. I don't think depression is actually a moral label. It's typically referring to our human nature. That we are all in this normal state of brokenness and sorrow and hopelessness. But if you think about it this way, let's say that you are the clinician, and I come in and I describe to you my condition, and my description is actually what you're going to base the alleged diagnosis of. You don't even need to see me. So there's we could do it over the phone, which is what's happening, right?
You could email me your 6 points
That's exactly right.
of
Yeah. And
of
so
what's wrong with you. Right.
yep. So if I say I'm just incredibly sorrowful, deep sorrow, I can't get out of bed, I'm losing weight, I have no desire. I used to enjoy watching movies. I don't even want to do that anymore. I just gave you a list of descriptions of who what I'm going through, the experience I'm going through. So you're not actually going into my body to find something wrong with me, but you're saying, oh, that is, what would you say it is?
Yeah,
Just
and
from the
so
description.
so I would look at the description, and my discernment would be: do I put this in box A or box B?
Correct. But you have to then explain what's going on with them, right? And
Right.
here the irony of this is, if you get to know my heart and my history, you'll find out why I'm incredibly sorrowful, why I'm lacking hope, right? Why I'm struggling with guilt and I can't sleep and I'm losing weight. But what psychiatry is actually doing is taking that description, and they're just redescribing it with a label. So depression becomes a redescription of what I just described to you. So nothing's actually discovered, nothing's actually found. You don't need any knowledge of the body or medicine to actually
Yeah.
evaluate me. You just need a description, and then you fit it into the phenomenological label that simply redescribes what has been described.
Yeah, that's one of the issues that I have with the PDI, the
Yeah.
personal data inventory, is that I get this sheet of paper 24 hours, and I don't use one. I've never used one, but uh, but I know biblical counselors like that. It's kind of a safety valve, a security blanket where I can prep for the meeting that I'm going to have tomorrow with a counselee. And so I get this information with the data on it, and then I can think through, okay, we need to go here or go there. But it's very limiting because there's really
Right.
no discernment there. If you did not use the PDI, and then met with the person in real time and space, and then begin the process of it, because every person doesn't quite fit into, let's say, a
Right.
PDI. And so move that off the table, meet with the individual pneumatically, the Spirit of God working through you, through them. The Word of God gives us the expanse of places that we can go with that individual. And then if you say have two people who sent in the identical same PDI, but yet when you meet with them in counseling, you could go in two different directions because these are unique human beings.
That's right.
The PDI has a limiting effect in that it can cookie cutter our counseling.
Well, it
As
actually
I
it discourages relationships.
Yes,
It,
right. It becomes more therapeutic and clinical,
right.
and we're really just processing people through a system rather than relationally, pneumatically work. But if you're a counselor and don't have the skill set or the experience to be able to do that well, you want those crutches to lean on, but
Yeah.
it keeps you within a paradigm that you can't escape from. And then in the clinical world, a clinician can unwittingly, and they do unwittingly, I assume, thinking the best, they do the same thing. You know, here are my here's my two answers for this problem or whatever, and
Sure.
then you're just plug and play, but you're really not diagnosing, and that's where you could actually do this through email
Yeah.
versus relationally. Truly diagnosing, not discerning between the two options that are before me, box A, box B, but having a plethora of directions that we can go with this unique individual.
Yeah. And to your point, that's why if you were a psychiatrist and I was a psychologist or another psychiatrist, and Betty Sue came to us, you could label her as depressed, and I could label her as bipolar or schizoaffective, depending on, because a lot of the descriptions actually overlap even within the psychiatric constructs, and this causes a lot of problems. So you'll meet people that have been given numerous different psychiatric labels, because again, this isn't like they've found something, they're just trying to explain. And sadly, it's a redescription, it's not an explanation, but that's how people take it. They actually take, we mentioned depression or sorrow, for example. Instead of understanding there is a real reason why you're depressed, now they look at this construct of depression as that's explaining their condition or their experience. So it actually misleads them away from that. I will say this. I'm like you. I never used PDIs at all. God's gifted me with a great memory. So as far as not mixing up cases and all that, I really get to know people when I'm counseling them. It's not something that's just, like it's some type of factory. There's a relationship that's established. However, since I've become the lead pastor here, I see the value for protecting our church body, having that information. So, I don't take copious notes in counseling, but I've learned if there's a sensitive case, not only do we need to take notes, but then if it's needed to be reported, we have to do all these things, and that happened before, but I'm just saying even more so now. We're in a church body setting, and we have to be extra careful. So there has to be that formality that we expect from everyone who's doing any type of counseling. The problem with that is discipleship, as you've already mentioned, is just relational. It's not, well, let me write this all down, while you're talking to me. And it's just, I think in many ways it has hurt soul care. It really has deterred us from doing things. It's the 2 Corinthians 1, the Pauline model of, I now comfort others with the same comfort I've received. But if you're having to stop and saying, well, I'll cry in just a minute, because I really feel like weeping with you, let me write this down. and I'm not saying that's what happens, but it really it creates that, like you said, professional environment that I don't know if God intended discipleship to be professional. And there are times I think it could be helpful, but vast majority of times it's, I meet at Panera Bread with people, and uh, part of it is because they give us food, too, on the leftovers at night. But it's a great place to just to be, or at our house, a non-formal. When I counsel here in the office yesterday, I had a family in here. My chair is over with them. It's not behind the desk. I want them to know that we're on the same playing field. We're all in need of a savior. And so, yeah, to your point, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, and you're drawing two distinctions. One is context, and the other is competence. Context hardly matters. My doctor supports our ministry financially. They come over to our home. We go over to their home, and he has done diagnosis, in my living
Right.
room by having conversation. I don't like to do that, by the way, because that's like your doctor shows up at the church meeting on Sunday morning and you start asking him medical questions. I would never ask him medical questions on Sunday morning because I want him to have a day off. But there have been a time or two where he's been in my living room and I said, "Hey, Doc, would you take a look
Yeah.
at this?" So context hardly matters. I mean, where it would matter would be the peripherals. I mean, if he needs, a stethoscope or an X-ray machine or whatever, I don't have one in my living room. But context hardly matters. Now, in the counseling world, it really doesn't matter at all. Coffee shop, the church building, wherever. Okay, so that's context. It's a very relational model. Everybody can do life over coffee to some degree, but then
That's right.
competence, then that's a whole nother issue. And so with the PDI, for example, I'm asking which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Does the PDI truncate our competence or the expansiveness of what we should or could be doing, or is it because we don't have the competence to be able to, and so we use the PDI as
As a crutch.
a crutch of sorts. And so, which is it? Now I know early on, and I also realize that there's a training continuum with each Christian that, my first counseling case, I was totally clueless of what I was doing. And so there's a training, element as well. And so I think my caution would be is that, for people who use a PDI, for example, are we using that because I'm really not skilled at doing this, and so I'm using this, to accomplish this? That would be the critical thing for me, because ultimately, then that does botch up the relationship with the person because we're not provided, adequate soul care. But a discipler, a biblical counselor, taking the legal side just aside, that we want a paper trail, we want to inform consent form, and so forth and so on. Put that over here, and the real issue is competence. With or without that, do I know how to diagnose a person and truly discern, all the elements, background shaping influences, idolatries of the heart, how to bring scripture to bear in a customizable way to the individual. Without that, do I have the
Yeah.
competence thing? And so
Yeah.
competence and context are important.
And I should probably add too that we the Bible uses labels, right? The Bible uses, so we're not opposing phenomenology. We're just saying we've got to use the biblical phenomenology. We've got to, if we're going to understand things biblical, it's like we've talked about with abuse. That word abuse is it takes people away from understanding what's actually the phenomena that's occurring biblically. And so when that occurs, we'll say, oh, the Bible discusses abuse. And so we go to the Bible, but what are we really talking about, right? And you and I have done videos on this. We can link people too, but it's similar. We actually do diagnosis when we do biblical counseling.
Right.
Parents are constantly diagnosing, right? We're discerning between what is depravity and what is fragility. We're discerning between what is good and what is bad. Proverbs 12:11. Even a child is known by their doings, whether it be pure and right. So there is a moral basis of our discernment in biblical counseling versus an alleged medical discernment, which is really, again, it actually is phenomenological. It's moral. It's not medical, and that's what people don't understand about psychiatry as a whole.
Yeah, and I'm not hobby horsing PDIs. I don't have I don't have any. I'm not beating up on that. I'm just using it as an illustration. But abuse is very similar. We can use shorthand mechanisms or shorthand words. Shorthand
Right.
mechanism could be this document to accomplish something, and we can use words like abuse as a shorthand to describe. But there is a bracket creep to the word abuse to where it just becomes all
Right.
encompassing. I was talking with an elder from Texas this past Saturday. He went to the ACBC conference in Charlotte. He wanted to meet. We were going to drive up and meet with him, but he actually wanted to see our lovely little town. And so they came down and stayed at a bed and breakfast. And so we met for several hours. He just became an elder at their church in Texas, and they are a supporter of our ministry. So we have an ongoing relationship. But one of the things he wanted to talk about as now becoming an elder, it's like, wow, okay, help me with this abuse thing. It's everywhere. It's just like ubiquitous. And so what he's seeing what he was saying in his own words is, I see things that are legitimately abuse. And then I see things like, wow, I don't think that's the best. So he's wrestling with these are new ideas to him because he's
Mm-hmm.
at a position to where now he's really having to wrestle through it, and that's why he wanted to talk. And it's one of the things I told him, and I've talked to our community about it on our forums, is that I've almost extracted the word abuse from my vocabulary because it's not the best label for whatever is happening. And it's not delegitimizing whatever is happening. It's not minimizing whatever is happening, but it's just labeling it a different way. Because some people say, well, you just don't believe in abuse. No, 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 no. I believe in whatever is happening is happening. I believe in
Yeah.
it. But abuse has become there's been such a bracket creep with abuse that is so encompassing that we don't even know what we're talking about anymore. And so I appealed to him that, what about if we just use biblical language? And so ask them, what is going on? Describe to me what is happening, who did what, who said what, and even recommended that they do it within a team environment because, I mean, after a while, you're Solomon. Let's just cut the baby in half. I don't know what to do with this because, he says yes, she says no,
Right.
etc. So within a team construct, can we get in and see exactly what's going on? And let's use other words because they're Bible words that really bring a lot of color and a lot of clarity to what's going on.
That's right. Yeah, and it's just like we defined diagnosis as we started, right? People could
Right,
say, "Oh, you don't believe in diagnosis." No, we need to
right.
define what we mean so that people can understand and gain discernment. Because, like you said, we're just using these terms, these constructs that we've created. Problem is, so many different people have different ideas
Yeah, that's
of
right. So a
what we're
kid,
talking about.
the parent says, "What do you mean my kid doesn't have ADHD?" Well, no, okay, because now
They
tug
have the
of
behaviors, but
we're
what do you mean by ADHD?
we're tug of warring over a label. And it's like, no, 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 no. It's really not the label that we really need to be talking about. We need to talk about the
Right.
behaviors. I did not say that the behaviors weren't real. What's happening
Exactly.
is
You'll
unreal.
never find ADHD in the body. No one will ever see ADHD. You'll see
Right,
behaviors.
right, right.
Clearly, the behaviors are there, right? But that's how they're trying to describe or redescribe what is being observed. So
As folks noticed, typically we do a 15-minute video. We have gone past that, but Daniel and I have
we
some.
need to catch up.
We are catching up, and I did want you to just walk through briefly what God is doing in you and Oriana's life with this huge transition with pastoring. And what's the name of the church up there?
Faith Fellowship, Faith
Faith
Fellowship in Clarence,
Church.
New York. Yep.
In Clarence, New York. They have a website. You can listen to Daniel's sermons on Sunday, and you're on YouTube, I imagine.
Yes, Faith Fellowship .us, and then also Facebook, YouTube, all that sermons are on there.
Yeah, and somebody told me this week, I don't remember who it was, because God has blessed you with a great memory. And I actually wanted to draw attention to that. God has blessed me with a lot of open space up here, and there's nothing, nothing there. And this is where I want, because I hear somebody say, "Wow, he's got a great memory. He's a great counselor." I'm not. I don't have a great memory. Well, this is where I want to give people hope. There's people like Daniel who could do counseling. And there's people that can't remember yesterday who could do counseling well. But I do recommend that you take better notes than Daniel if you have a memory like mine. But somebody, I don't know who, just told me in the last couple of days they had been listening to your messages from Faith, and they really have enjoyed them. And so
Praise the Lord.
I will, if I remember, I will put a link to maybe YouTube, or maybe YouTube, where people can listen to your sermons. As far as Life Over Coffee, we don't have a game plan, and so we're going to be pneumatic with that as well. We're going to continue to do them, but we're going to flex, and it's okay. Things change.
So send us ideas if you have them. So we're
right. If you want to put questions in the comments of this YouTube video, please do that, and we'll interact with them. But the beauty of this is that we can just jump on and do a Zoom call, and I don't have to pack up and go over to your house anymore. So this is a little more efficient, even though we're not, in front of us. So, all right. So Daniel, thanks so much.
Appreciate it, Rick.
Tell Oriana we said hello.
I will do so.
All right. See ya.